Hello, it's time for another video. Now I'm adjusting my camera because before I hit play, everything was farther back. It had a wider angle, and as soon as I hit play, suddenly not as much is fitting in there. That's kind of annoying. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this video, because it really isn't time for another video. This is a little extra for me, a little bit more than I usually do. And the reason why is because, and now my camera holder isn't going to behave either. This may not work, and I may have to do this all over again somehow. I know how to do it. I'll just hold it in my hand. Stupid freaking thing. Alright, so this is going to be kind of awkward. That works if I can figure out where to look. There we are. Okay, so yesterday morning I got up out of bed, and the first thing I do when I get out of bed, after I weigh myself and do that kind of thing, if you've seen my other videos, you know what I'm talking about. But after that, I sit down and have a Rockstar energy drink, one of these. And I get woken up. And I usually watch a YouTube video or something while I do it, right? So yesterday I happened to notice that Craig Faraway of CraigTube had put up a new video. And so, okay, so there we go. There's something to watch. I click it and I watch it. And what he's doing in this video is he's answering a bunch of questions. There are 9 questions from someone on YouTube. Her YouTube handle is Tasting Nitch, N-I-T-C-H. And these questions are all about beer. Well, they're not about beer. They're about the people who, I guess, drink or brew beer. And you answer them about yourself. And part of this is that at the end of the questions, you're supposed to tag 5 other people to also answer the questions. So it's sort of one of these, like, pyramid scheme, pay it forward type of things. And it's okay, I'm listening to Craig as he answers his questions, and it's kind of interesting. And he gets to the end and he says he had a whole bunch of people that, he didn't want to try to choose between them, who the 5 should be, whatever. So he put them all in a hat or something. Kind of seems like he said a hat. That was probably symbolic if he did, but and he just randomly drew out 5 names to do, right? And he's going along naming the names, and suddenly I hear my name. It's like, what?
Jeff Healy is a good guy. I like him. Let's go. Off you get. Get that camera rolling. He knows how to do it.
It's interesting to me that I even came to mind to put in the hat. So I'm kind of honored to have been remembered, to have been included in that. So I'm just making a video to answer the questions. I actually answered these all last night. I made a video that when I went to sit down and edit it, I realized it was just way too long and that I was getting way too wordy. And I was, I don't know, talking about irrelevant things, going off on people on Twitter, things like that. So let's just take a look at what the questions are. I'm using my camera, of course, my phone to do this video, so I can't use it for 2 things at once. So I wrote down the questions. And interestingly enough, her questions are slightly different from Craig's questions. That's sort of like the game of telephone. You tell one person, and then that person tells somebody else, and that person tells somebody else, and it just sort of evolves and changes the questions over time. So, and then, of course, now I've written down the questions in a sort of shorthand manner, so I don't even have the full questions in front of me. But here's the first one. It's, how did you get into beer geeking, and why beer? So the answer for me to that is that I bought, there was this, I think I might have got it from thinkgeek.com. And all of a sudden, I can't remember the name of the product. They went out of business, but they had sold this little tube of yeast, and you would put the yeast into a bottle of juice, and it came with a 3-piece airlock that was made to fit in a bottle of juice. Actually, it's just an ordinary airlock. It just happens to fit in a bottle of juice, and you'd put that in there, and you'd wait 3 or 4 days, and then you would get this fizzy drink that was alcoholic. And I started doing that with a bunch of different kinds of juice, and I thought, wow, this is really good. And then I thought, I wonder if I could make cider, and I, used the yeast with some apple juice, and it was not good at all. And that was probably because I just let it wait too long. I don't know, but I started researching that, wound up on Amazon. I'm not sure what I bought first, but I noticed that Mr. Beer sold a homebrew kit, and it's called the Little Brown Keg, and then they had the exact same thing, it's just not brown, it's clear, that was made for cider, and I ended up buying both of those things. And it was really just off of this thing of starting to ferment juice, and it was really good. And I ended up starting with Mr. Beer. My favorite beer, I don't really know that I have a favorite, but it's whatever it is, it's on the darker side. These the light color beers, they don't really do much for me. I love stouts. I love milk stouts. Like brown ales, ambers, red ales, things like that. Forever beer. Oh yeah, the way she put it was, if you could have only one beer forever, which would it be? And then I forget how Craig asked it, but that's basically what it boils down to. If you could have only just one beer and never any other beer. And I don't know what I guess I would probably choose a red ale, because it's a little on the darker side, but it's not too dark. And I've had some of those with some pretty complex flavors. And I think those are pretty good. How do you drink so much? This is all question number 4, but she actually put 2 questions on the same line. Number 1, how do you drink so much? And the second question is, how do you stay healthy? And that kind of evolved with some people into something like, how do you drink so much and stay healthy, right? And, well, I'm not always healthy. That's, I've always been kind of a health nut, but much more than other people. But on February 17th of this year, I was 197 pounds, which is a lot for me. And I was really sedentary, and I was waking up with headaches, and that was related to the beer. It's possible that it had something to do with hangovers. It definitely had to do with dehydration, because you drink, I would drink 3 or 4 beers. It was too much. And when I have alcohol in my system, I tend to clench my teeth at night, and that's what gives me the headache. That's why I don't really call it a hangover, but yeah, so I've been getting fit and working out and losing weight. And you just got to put health first. Am I an alcoholic? And I think the word alcoholic needs to be retired. The very concept of alcoholism needs to be just sort of put away and demolished. I don't think it's a useful concept. I think it's silly. And in other words, I don't think it exists. What I do think exists is people who haven't learned impulse control, and they haven't learned to put their long-term self-interests ahead of their short-term interests. And so if you think of it in that terms, the question becomes, do I drink to a degree that it hurts my long-term interests just because I like getting drunk or something? And the answer is no. That's, and plus I quit all the time, in the sense that, I'm on a diet, and I have a spreadsheet that decides based on how well I'm doing on my diet. It's not me deciding, really, it's the spreadsheet deciding. And I had it, recently, it had me go 10 days without drinking alcohol. And so I had to go 10 days, and it had me go 4 days once. And so, yeah, it's like I can quit anytime, and I actually do. In fact, one time when I was working out like a madman, I went a year without drinking. It was somewhere around the 7 or 8 month mark that somebody asked me, well, when's the last time you had a beer? And I thought back, and I realized when it was, and it had been that long ago. And from that point forward, even though I probably wouldn't have had anything to drink anyway going forward, it was sort of in my mind, now I got to make it to a year. And then I made it, I don't know, like into the next month, and I had it in my head, well, I made it the year, I should have a drink or something. And if I'd never realized how long I'd gone, I maybe would never have had one, or at least not have had one that soon. Let's see, favorite ingredient in beer. And I don't really know. I don't know how to answer that question. I think it's because I like just so many beers, but I do like lactose, right, to make milk stouts and cream ales, things like that. So I guess I'm kind of the not real good kind of drinker, in the sense that I kind of like the heavier beers, the ones that have too many calories in them, because the fermentation has left a lot of malt sugars behind, and so yeah, that's lactose is kind of what occurs to me. But you need the things that go with beer, right? You need the hops, and you need the yeast, and you need all the other things. What else? I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. What do you put in beer, right? I mean, I once tried, I had Murphy's Irish Stout, which is a good stout, and I thought, this might be good with a scoop of vanilla ice cream in it, and, it really wasn't, so I don't know. Let's see, oh, do you brew, is how she put it, and the answer is, yeah, I brew. And I think the question that Craig answered on CraigTube was, his was a two-part question: do you brew, and what's your favorite method, right? And I would say my favorite method is the method I've never done before, and that is all grain. And that's because I really like the idea of being able to really control your ingredients and being able to be really creative, rather than just put together someone else's recipe. And if you look at the other extreme of that, you would look at, say, a Cooper's kit, and you'd take I don't know why we call it a kit. It's just a can of pre-hopped extract, and you mix that in some boiling water, and then you mix it up with some an adjunct like they actually have their brew enhancer stuff that you would get, or you would just use your own dry malt extract or whatever to bump up the alcohol, and then you add some cold water. And so have you really even made it? No, all you've done is you've sort of mixed it together. It's not even like you followed a recipe from scratch, which in that case, you're just the grunt when you follow someone else's recipe from scratch, right? But at least you're doing something. So normally when I make beer, it's actually an extract kit where I just have liquid or dry malt extract, and then I have to do the boil with some specialty grains to steep them for a little bit, and then add the hops and stuff like that. So it's somewhere in between the all grain and the pre-hopped extract can. So in the sense of my favorite, if you think my favorite is what I do the most, then that's what it is. If you think of my favorite as what I really like the idea of the most, it's all grain. That brings us to, what was my first beer? Now, I don't know about that. I probably had tasted some Budweiser or something when my parents are divorced, and when I was a little kid, I probably had some with my dad, but he went off to be a hippie, and he went and lived on Casper Mountain in Wyoming. It was in a cabin in the woods that had no water or electricity. Yeah, no water either, that's true. Water or electricity or anything. Actually, that one the one I'm thinking of right now actually had water to it. We actually lived in a cabin in Ava, Missouri, too, that didn't even have water. That was something else. Had to shower outside under the tree. You'd heat up water on the wood stove. And anyway, there was one day there that a bunch of the hippies all got together, and there was one guy, he was a reverend of a church, and I think we were at his cabin, and everyone was drinking Coors. Coors was the really big thing back then. This was, I don't know, this was maybe 1978, 79. And Coors was this thing that Coors refused to sell it on the east side of the Continental Divide. And I think there was like a lawsuit or something forcing them to sell it on the other side. And Coors was the really big deal, right? And everybody was drinking Coors, and I was going around, I think it was like 11 or something, and I was going around asking everybody, can I have a sip, can I have a sip? And I don't know, I probably ended up with 20 ounces of it in me, and I was definitely feeling it, and people noticed I was feeling it, and I wouldn't say that went over badly, but let's just say it didn't go over too well either. So that's the first beer that I can actually really remember. Who do I look up to? And I think that was like, who do I look up to in the brewing community? And for me, that's kind of a weird question, because I don't really look up to a lot of people. I'm sort of an ideas person, not a people person. So there's a lot of things that can make me look down on people. Like if people are mean or rude to other people, and deliberately so. And if people are just, if they do it because they're poor thinkers, for one thing. I mean, if they're in Utah, I don't really hear the guys say it very often, but when I was, the teenage girls, they say, that's ignorant. There's this word in Utah, ignorant. It's 2 syllables. What they're really trying to say is ignorant, of course. But that's ignorant. And what they mean is rude, but it kind of comes from the idea of being rude because you're dumb and you don't know what you're talking about, and you're rude to people that way. But I suppose in terms of looking up to people, I like people who study their craft and they like to get it right and they like to know things in detail. And so if you're talking about in the home brew or brewing beer, I would just say, anyone who's actually doing it in a craft brewery, people who are writing books. I like the way that Craig Faraway on CraigTube, he just keeps learning and keeps experimenting for himself. And that's another thing I like about the home brew people in general, is that they just keep experimenting for themselves and learning, and they're interested in it. So moving on from there, that's all 9 questions, and I am on my lunch break at work, and I gotta go. But I'll tell you this, when I put this up, I'm going to put a link to my weight loss series that I'm still in the middle of at the top right, and then I'll put a proper homebrew video at the top or the bottom right, and then I'll put a link to subscribe to my channel at the lower left. Oh, I should say one more thing. I'm not calling anybody out to do this, and the reason why is, for Craig to have called me out, he had to have had some thought that I would actually see it, right? Otherwise, you can't call somebody out if they can't hear you, right? So now all you have to do is look at my videos, and you can realize, wow, this guy can go put up a video, and that video can be there months and months and barely break a couple of dozen hits. And most of those hits are, I don't know, somebody finds them in a search engine or something, they watch for 30 seconds, and then they're gone. And so even if I called people out at the end of this video, they wouldn't know, number one. Number two, I don't know who I'd call out. I mean, I could call out people that I know do some brewing, whatever, but from what I've seen, a lot of people have already done these questions, so why call out people who have already done it? And so I'm kind of at a loss, so I've got no one to call out, and see you later. Click those links.